that Magna Carta is, and always has been, rather like a living being. Now, 800 years ago, back in 1215, it was like many a newborn in the Middle Ages. It was very lucky to survive into infancy. It had no qualities that looked like they were going to give it a long and healthy life. But Magna Carta had a sturdy heart, and over 800 years it grew up, if you like, and it changed to become a champion. And over the next few minutes we're going to look at that amazing, dramatic life story. So let's just remind ourselves first of all of some basic facts about Magna Carta. Back in 1215 there were a group of English barons who were in armed conflict against the English King John. The two sides figured that they'd better negotiate a peace. It was actually not much more than a stalling tactic. They knew it was going to come to an all-out civil war. So they met at Runnymede, which is a meadow on the banks of the Thames, as you probably know. It's about 4 miles to the west of Heathrow Airport. And then the Archbishop of Canterbury, well, he did a kind of Henry Kissinger. He shuttled back and forth between the two sides and he negotiated a deal. And the terms of that deal were then recorded in Magna Carta, which was agreed by the king. So that is it. If you go much beyond there, then you get into an area which is shrouded in myth and misunderstanding. So let's get a few of those out of the way first of all. These are the common myths. First of all, that King John was an evil, unredeemed tyrant. Secondly, that the barons were a united force representing the interests of the whole of the English nation. Then there's Magna Carta. It's often said that it's the birth of modern democracy, that it's the first constitution, and that it gave us equality under the law. So just have a look at these one by one. Was King John an evil tyrant? Well, actually, historians today have got a much more nuanced opinion of him. It was the Victorians who started this, or in fact, it was much before that. It was the only journalists of the day back in the 13th century who were the monks. And they were definitely on the side of the barons, and they were not above making up a lot of stories about him. The Victorians swallowed them whole. They said that King John was so foul, he would even befoul hell itself. Can you think of anything more damning than that? But today, historians reject that. He certainly wasn't a plaster saint, and he wasn't the sort of guy you want to sit next to at a dinner party. But he was full of contradictions. If anything, his worst crime was that he was unpredictable. He could turn against people very quickly. But you have to remember something, that if you were a monarch back in the 13th century, if you showed signs of weakness, you'd be overthrown very quickly. We mustn't judge King John, as ever, people in our past, by the standards of our own day. King John, no plaster saint and a complex guy, not an unredeemed tyrant. Then there are the barons. You see this picture here that I've got. This is actually a Victorian image painted by Sir Edward Normand. And you see these barons here, straight back, look you in the eye, honest Joes, and King looks a bit shifty. This is what the Victorians thought. Actually, the barons weren't quite like that. Historians today regard the barons who rebelled against King John as a bunch of self-serving thugs. There were 170 great families back in 1215. Of those, only 40 were in rebellion against the king. And here's a surprise. Actually, there were another 40 who took up arms in defense of the king. And there were 70 barons who had nothing to do with either side. A rather different story. Okay, then there's Magna Carta itself. Was it the birth of modern democracy? Not unless you really stretch the meaning of the word democracy. It's nothing to do with politics. It doesn't challenge the king's right to rule. Is it the first constitution? It has nothing to do with defining the mechanics of government. And nor back in 1215 was it a document which was unchangeable for all time. Did it give us equality underneath the law, beneath the law? Well, this is a bit trickier, really. You'll see in a moment when we look at it, it didn't strictly do that, but it had some promising signs about it, so we won't cross it out. But we still, despite everything that I'm saying, rightly are here celebrating Magna Carta. You'll be pleased to know this, incidentally, you've not wasted your time. We're rightly celebrating Magna Carta as the foundation of freedom under the law. Let's take a look at the document, shall we? Here it is, as Liz pointed out, there were 13 of them. There's no one Magna Carta. It was written out 13 times and then was taken under armed guard to all the cathedral cities of England to be read out. It is a piece of parchment. Parchment, incidentally, is a bit of sheepskin which was soaked in lime and then scraped. The words were written on it in abbreviated medieval Latin, in soot mixed with a natural acid. It's about the size of the front page of the New York Daily News, turned on its side. It's not very impressive when you look at it. But, of course, that's not the end of the story. Magna Carta, what was it? Well, first of all, there is no statement of principle in it at all. There is nothing that says that the king must always behave in the best interests of his subjects, for instance, or we're all equal under the law. There's nothing like that at all in it. It has a total of 63 clauses. 12 of them tackle abuses by the king and his officials. For instance, if a sheriff comes along and decides